We are studying about Ephesus, but we are in the book of Acts. I know it's a little confusing sometimes. We're going to study the letters, the epistles that Paul wrote to the church at Ephesus called Ephesians. But before we do that, we have to go back and we have to look at what actually happened while Paul was in Ephesus, how he started the church. And so that's what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. And so today is no different. And so I'm just going to give you a little bit of history this morning. I'm going to read just a tidbit of the very first. Don't worry about putting it on the screen, Warren. I'm going to get to those pictures after I read this particular part. We're in Acts 19. And I'm just going to read them, but we are going to study them this morning, so I'm just going to read them to you just to set the stage for what's to come. It says, after all this had happened, Paul decided to go to Jerusalem, passing through Macedonia and Achaia. After I have been there, he said, I must visit Rome also. He sent two of his helpers, Timothy and Erastus, to Macedonia, while he stayed in the province of Asia a little longer. About that time there arose a great disturbance about the way. A silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought in no little business for the craftsmen. And so that's where we first hear about Artemis. And this is what I want to talk to you about. So if we'll put the first picture on the screen. This is the temple of Artemis. It was a temple that was built to the goddess Artemis in Greek civilization, known as Diana in Roman. The temple rooms remain located in Ephesus. Currently, it's Turkey. Its construction was ordered and directed by King Croesus of Lydia, and this ended about 120 years later. The temple was most beautiful and large and made up of groups of several buildings. You can see how large it is if you'll go to the next picture. The temple of Artemis was destroyed by fire in the year 356. Artemis, Diana, the goddess, was originally, before her cult was taken over by the Greeks, called Artemis. And her temple, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, received gifts from the Lydian king. And so one of Artemis's characteristics is that she protects fertility. Okay, so we'll go to the next picture. This is a statue of Diana that was in the temple. And you can see she's very ornate. This is a replica, of course. The very first one was actually made out of wood and was destroyed during that fire. And so this is a replica of that. And so if you see around, you know, she has a scroll up here, and then you see this down here. If you'll go to the next picture, it shows us these bulbous. You know, she is the queen of fertility here. And so a lot of people think that those represent breast. And then some other ones, which I tend to agree with, they represent bull testicles. And I know this is Sunday morning, but the children aren't here and we're all adults. But they're bull testicles, although they may also be boards, which were known in Asia as fertility symbols for centuries. Artemis's robe is always decorated with lions, leopards, goats, griffins, and bulls, which represent Artemis's title of Lady of the Animals. And so that's a little bit of a history lesson this morning. And so if you'll go to the next one, she was it in Ephesus. She was who they worshipped. She was their idol. She was their god. And so even their silver coins had her imprinted on them as a symbol of who they worshipped. And so I just want you to understand and know what's going on in Ephesus at this time. This is who everyone in that city bowed down to. This is who they adhered to. This is who reigned in that area. And so she was very prominent. And so we're just going to talk about that a little bit this morning, because this is what's going on there, is that Paul has come into this city. He started to talk about Jesus Christ. He's telling everybody that there's one true God. And he's showing them how. He's talking about Christ. He's talking about his death, his resurrection. He's talking about how he lives today. And then, and so he starts to tell, you have to remember that Paul was there in Ephesus for 2 years, if not longer. Almost 3. And so the time that he spent there, he's preaching and teaching about one true God. Well, if you come into a city and this is who they are following, there's going to be some ruckus. There's going to be some things that just are not going to be taken well. And so this is exactly what we're going to learn about today. But I wanted to give you a little bit of background about the temple of Artemis and what she represents herself. Okay, let's go to the scriptures. Everybody go back in your Bibles. We're going to go back to Acts 19. We're going to start with verse 21 through 22. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of background here. First of all, the very first sentence says, after all this happened. Let me just go back a little bit from last week and remind you about the 7 sons of Sceva. Remember, they were 7 sons of a Jewish priest, and they had gone out and they started trying to rebuke an evil spirit out of a possessed individual using the name Jesus. Had no relationship to Jesus in any form or fashion, but yet was trying to call the spirits out. And as we know, it didn't turn out very well, because the spirit overtook them and literally ripped their clothes off, all 7 of them, and had them running out of the house. And so because of that, all of those that were involved in sorcery realized and came to themselves. They had to come to Jesus' meeting, basically. And they realized that what they were doing was wrong. I mean, talk about some serious conviction. And we're talking black and white. And that's how God works. And that's amazing stuff right there. Where somebody wakes up one day, they see the truth, it's laid upon their heart, and then the next thing you know, they have turned from their evil ways. They have gone just the complete opposite, totally surrendering to God. And that's what these people that were going around casting out demons and having all these spells and making a living doing it. And so what they did is, instead of them just going home and deciding we're not going to do this anymore, they all came together. They all brought their scrolls, which were extremely expensive, and they threw them in and had a big old bonfire together and said, we're not doing this anymore. And we're not going to keep these books around so that anybody else could possibly gather them up and use them too. So we're just going to burn them. They literally surrendered 100% to God on that day. And so at that time, when he says after all this happened, it wasn't just those 2 things. It wasn't just the fact that the spirit overcame. It wasn't just the fact that all of the sorcery stopped at that point. But what happened after that is that the word of the Lord spread. And that's what he's talking about. He's saying, after all this happened, and then the word of the Lord spread. Here's all this, people just start coming. And the church at Ephesus just is building and growing because the Holy Spirit is just taking over. And they're just touching people's hearts and transforming them. And so at that time, after all this happened and the word was spreading so widely, Paul decides to go to Jerusalem, passing through Macedonia and Achaia. And then he says to himself, after I have been there, I think I want to go to Rome. I think I want to go to Rome and check it out and see the sights. And so what he does is he sends his 2 helpers, Timothy and Erastus, to Macedonia. And while he stayed in the province of Asia just a little bit longer. And so in verse 23 and 26 it says, about that time there arose a great disturbance. Well, wouldn't you know, about the way. Jesus Christ, that's what they called it, the way. A silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought in no little business for the craftsmen. He called them together along with the workmen in related trades and said, men, you know we receive a good income from this business. And you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia. He says that man-made gods are no gods at all. Well, let's just take craftsman who makes little statues out of silver. And they make a lot of money. Did you see how big the temple is? I mean, they make a lot of money. And what happens is people from all over come to pay, honor to this fertility god. And then they leave. You know how you go on vacation and you're like, I just want a little momentum. I just want something to remind me as I go home, So you buy a little magnet for your refrigerator or a little something, and you take it home, and then when you walk by and you go, I remember that trip. That was great. That's exactly what they did. People would come from all over. They would honor the god of fertility. And let me tell you, the temple was a very bad place. There were orgies happening all over. It was the god of fertility, right? So people came there to engage in sexual activity there in front in the temple because the god was present, and so they were thinking that they were going to have a baby. They were going to, and so it was a very wicked place. And there were shops, and there were all kinds of different buildings in there. And so people would come and they would buy these little silver, shrines and take them home and worship them. And so Demetrius is very upset because you start to hone in on my craft here. I'm a craftsman. This is what I do. And I'm kind of upset about that. Who is this Paul guy coming in here talking about, that gods made out of statues are not gods at all? What is he talking about? And so, because as we see, Paul's been there for about a year or so. This is getting into the last part of his visit here in Ephesus. And he's preached. Remember, he preached daily in the school? Daily, for 2 years. And so we're getting at that end part. So there's a lot of people that are being transformed, that are being changed. And so here he is, going and speaking the truth, and Demetrius is just very upset by it. And so what does he do? He doesn't just take it on himself. He pulls the other craftsmen in and those that work alongside of the craftsmen. And he starts to kind of say, he starts the whole trickle-down effect, right? We got to do something. They're honing in on our business. And we make a lot of income from this. And so the other people get on board, and he starts to talk negative about Paul. And so let's look at verse 27 and 28. It says, there is danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty. And when they heard this, they were furious and began shouting, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Well, see, Demetrius is a smart man. He realizes that he can't just go on the guise of, we're about to lose some income here. So he knows that if he just goes on that, people are going to be like, whatever. Seriously? You're just so worried about your income. But so what he does is he makes them realize and see that there's just some discredit here against the goddess. And that if this happens, that this is just horrific to come to Ephesus. This is our God that we worship. And if we allow him to come in, then she's going to be discredited. And so he made it all about Diana. He made it all about the temple itself of Artemis. Knowing full well how the Ephesians felt about her, they had worshipped her for years. And so that's where he leaned in on. He knew that he had to be cunning. He knew that he had to show it to them in a different way. And it worked. It worked because they started to shout about, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. And so in verse 29 we see it says, soon the whole city was in an uproar. And I guess so. That'd be like, people that just really loved the mayor of Texas City and then some coming against them. And, you can just see how all of a sudden there just becomes this big uproar. And they're being tested. All of those in Ephesus are being tested. Where are your loyalties? Where does your loyalty lie? Is it going to be in the goddess of Artemis? Is it going to be her? Or is it going to be this new teaching that we just heard from Paul? So there just becomes this big uproar. And it says the people seized, these are two of Paul's traveling companions. He seized Gaius and Aristarchus, Paul's traveling companions from Macedonia, and rushed as one man into the theater. Paul wanted to appear before the crowd, but the disciples would not let him. Even some of the officials of the province, friends of Paul, sent him a message begging him not to venture into the theater. So what happens is the whole city's in an uproar. They're trying to figure out what to do. And so Demetrius is, he's heading the whole thing. And so instead of grabbing Paul, they grab his companions. Okay? And they rush him into this theater. This theater seats about 25,000 individuals. It's a huge amphitheater. And they take them in there, and the people just start coming out of the woodwork to fill the theater. They see, and isn't that how it works? I mean, mobs just come out of nowhere. They don't even know what they're doing, right? They just follow, and they just like, what do we do? And then the next thing you know, they're just running beside the next person, and it's just, the crowd gets bigger and bigger, and then they don't even know what they're there for. That's how a mob starts. And that's exactly what happened here. It's just like everything was in an uproar. There was confusion, there was commotion, there was, screaming and yelling, and so everybody just starts to follow it. And I just got to tell you, that's a lesson for us today. You got to be real careful that you know the truth, because it's easy to be sucked into the mob and to be carried away by what somebody else thinks or believes, because you just allow yourself to just become part of it. You start to meld into it. The next thing you know, you're thinking the same way. You're spouting off things, and you have to be careful that you know the truth, and that you're able to stand against it and to pull back and say, I'm not part of that. I don't even know what's going on. Let me step back from that. So that's good for us to see what happens. And so, so Paul wants to appear before the crowd, which isn't a good idea. Paul is the one that's preaching the good news of Jesus Christ. He's the one that has the knowledge and the authority. He's the one that has the Holy Spirit. He's the one that is taking it to all the different places in the cities. And so he's being used by God. And so everyone's like, no, that is a bad idea. Because if Paul would have gone into the assembly there, he probably would have been ripped apart physically. He would have been stoned and ripped apart, and they would have killed him. And so all the officials, were telling him, no, we don't want you to go in there. And so let's see what happens in verse 32 and 34. It says, the assembly was in confusion. Some were shouting one thing, some another. Most of the people did not even know why they were there. The Jews pushed Alexander to the front, and some of the crowd shouted instructions to him. He motioned for silence in order to make a defense before the people, but when they realized that he was a Jew, they all shouted in unison. For about 2 hours this happened. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Can you imagine coming in, you're trying to calm the mob, and your people behind you are pushing you forward as the one to do it. There's 25,000 angry individuals there. The other thing is, he's a Jew. And Jewish people don't believe in idol worshiping either. And so they certainly are not on the side of the Gentiles and the Greeks. And so here his friends are like, go ahead, Alexander, you try to fix this. And what happens is he goes to speak, he lifts his hands, and then what do? They just shout over him for 2 hours, and he gets absolutely nothing accomplished whatsoever. Which is understandable. Because he's in no better position as Paul is, because he's not for them either. He's against idol worship as well. So he doesn't even have, any heart for that at all. So let's see what happens next. In verse 35 through 37, it says, the city clerk quieted the crowd and said, Men of Ephesus, doesn't all the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of the great Artemis and of her image which fell from heaven? Therefore, since these facts are undeniable, you ought to be quiet and not do anything rash. You have brought these men here, though they have neither robbed temples nor blaspheming our goddess. And so here it is, the city clerk of all people steps forward, but he has the ability and the authority to quiet the crowd. And he appeals to them just like Demetrius did, but just in a different way. Okay? Ephesus was a free city. Although they were in a Roman province, and they were allowed to run as a free city. They were not under Roman rule. They were allowed to have their own officials, and they watched over them. And so that was a big thing for the church for the city of Ephesus. That was huge for them, and he didn't want any commotion whatsoever for the Romans to come in and to take that away from him, to take that away from them. So as a smart city official, he comes in, he quiets the crowd, and he goes, they haven't done anything wrong. We're still who we say we are. We're still is she not still the goddess of fertility? Is she still not the goddess of Ephesus? Of course she is. And so he appeals to the crowd and their sensitivity to the goddess that they worship for so long. And it works. And everybody is quieted. But I love the fact that there's just confusion. It just goes along that same line that people are shouting, well, they don't even know why they're there. They don't even know what's going on, but they become a part of it. It's very comical to me. But it happens today. I read on Facebook all the time, people will take little things, and the next thing you know, they're running with it. And it's like, you really believe that? If you really sat down and thought about what it is that you're putting out there for other people to see in social media, that doesn't just stop where you think it does, but it just keeps going and going and going. You can share it and share. I mean, it just, do you really believe that? Or did you just jump on a bandwagon because somebody said something and you kind of liked them? Your ears were tickled a little bit by it. So we just have to really be careful that we're not sucked up into that mob mentality. That we're not sucked up in believing or following somebody else's thought process or belief system. We really do have to know the truth. We really do have to test it against the Spirit. We have to bring it before God and say, is this right or is this wrong? You tell me. But the city clerk was able to calm them down in their confusion and just reinforcing the fact that that temple has been there for years, and we're going to continue to do exactly what we're doing. And so then he goes on to say, look, there's better ways to handle this, okay, instead of rioting out here. And in verse 38 through 41, it says, if then Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a grievance against anybody, the courts are open and there are proconsuls. He basically is saying, look, there's a better way to handle this. Let's just take it to court. We have all the systems set up in place, and if he feels like he's being wronged, we don't need this to be some big thing here at the theater, but we need to go to the court system. It's all been set up, and he can file a grievance against whatever it is. And he says they can press charges if they want. If there is anything further you want to bring up, it must be settled in a legal assembly. He knew very well that, I'm telling you, whether they had a legal assembly or not, if Paul or someone would have stepped into that place, they would have killed him, regardless of the laws that were set up. And so he was really trying to make sure that there was nothing that was going to bring the Romans over to keep them from being a free city. And so he was doing everything he can as a county clerk to make sure that happened. And so it says, and it is, as it is, we are in danger of being charged with rioting because of today's events. In that case, we would not be able to account for this commotion, since there is no reason for it. And after he had said this, he dismissed the assembly. And so we see here that, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in Ephesus. Paul has made just a tremendous stride in preaching the Word of God to all those that are there. And see, that's the thing that we just have to keep remembering, is that they are huge into idol worship. They have their own gods. They have, everything is set in their ways. But he's coming to teach something different. And he is very successful. And so he's really making points there. But when that happens, who comes in? Satan. See, Paul's doing God's good work. He's bringing the Word of God to a multitude of people. He's presenting it. The Holy Spirit is changing their hearts and their lives. And things are different. And the city doesn't like it. The officials don't like it. The Jews certainly don't like it. And so, whenever that happens, whenever God's work is being done, Satan rears his ugly head. And so, we can glean from just this verse 21 through 41, it gives us encouragement. It gives us hope to know that that is our job and responsibilities as ministers of the Word of God. And to go out, we have to go in faith. Faith that God is going to take care of the end result. And that sometimes whenever we go and we present the gospel, that Satan's going to rear his ugly head in our lives. That things are going to come against us. That things are going to happen. But we have to stand steadfast. We have to stand in the truth. We have to stand in what we know. And we're going to be persecuted for it. We're going to be, attacked because of it. And it's no different today than it was back then. It's no different today when you walk across the street to tell your neighbor about Jesus Christ, or you're standing in the line at the grocery store. Satan doesn't like that. He doesn't want you to do that. But as an ambassador for Christ, as a Christ follower, it is what we are called to do. And so I just want to encourage you to stand fast. Don't give up. Keep preaching to your family members that don't know Jesus. Keep telling them about the good news of Jesus Christ. There's much to learn about that. That He is the one true God. That He is alive. That He does sit on the throne. That He is your deliverer. He is your defender. He will protect you and give you strength. He stands as your advocate. He goes before you. And so, He will be there for you. Keep preaching that. And I can guarantee you that God will not. He will not allow those words to come back void. Because that's what He's called us to do. So we just have to be diligent. We just have to be persistent in our persuasion of the gospel. And Paul shows us a very good example of that. He himself, I could just see Paul, I got to go in, I got to go. No, I need to go in there. I know I can, and I'm sure that they were physically holding him back because he wanted so bad to go and just, one more time, let me just share with them. I know that if they just knew about God, that they would, I could just see him with that, just that tenacity and that, fervor. He's just so passionate about Jesus Christ and telling people about Him. But they were like, no, you can't go. You don't understand. If you go in there and they kill you, you're it. You're much higher than us. You have greater authority. There's so many things that you're doing. You're healing people with your handkerchief. We don't have that authority, that ability. And so they were trying to really keep him back. But I can guarantee you that he really wanted to go in there. There was that deep passion to go and to present the gospel one more time. In a theater of 25,000, that's awesome, right? Would have had the floor. But God had other plans, and He said no. And so people are going to come against you. People are going to say things. But don't stop. Just keep doing what God's called you to do. Keep telling them about Jesus. Keep calling and inviting them to church. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep praying for them. Keep being there for them. Keep encouraging them. Because that's what God wants you to do. Please stand. Father God,